can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sand. And right now, I feel like 100 grand.
You are listening to Inspired Insider with your host, Dr. Jeremy Wise.
Dr. Jeremy Wise here, founder of InspiredInsider.com, where I talk with inspirational entrepreneurs and leaders, the founders you've heard of, some you've never heard of. Josh, what I love hearing is the challenge, low moment stories like P90X founder Tony Horton. Yeah, he's made hundreds of millions of dollars by selling DVDs and other things, but he talked about when he was trying to make food and rent money. When he went cross country, he was the street mime. So he'd put his hat on the street, and whatever money he made there, he would have to pay for his food and rent. Baby Einstein founder Julie Clark talks about growing her business to $20 million with 5 employees and selling to Disney. But she also, most impressive part was she beat cancer twice in that journey. And Atari founder Nolan Bushnell, who was Steve Jobs' mentor, talked about when Steve Jobs offered him 33% of Apple for $50,000 and why he said no to that. So you can check out InspiredInsider.com for more episodes. And this episode is brought to you by Rise 25, which I co-founded with my business partner, John Corcoran. And we help B2B businesses connect to their Dream 100 clients and referral partners and help you run your podcast so it generates ROI. And, for me, and Josh has a great podcast too. And for me, it's a lot more personal than just business. It was inspired because my grandfather, who was a Holocaust survivor, him and his brother were in concentration camps in Nazi Germany, and they were the only people of their family to survive. And the legacy of him lives on because the Holocaust Foundation did an interview with him, and I put it on my About page, and I watch it multiple times a year. And it's crazy, the stories, and it gives me gratitude, appreciation for my life and what I go through. But it makes me think when I have people like Josh Fonger on, it's not just about the content, it's about leaving a legacy, and people hopefully be able to watch this for years to come. And so I do credit podcasting as the single best thing I've done for my business and my life. And I do think every business should have a podcast, period. So if you have questions, you want to start one, you can email us, support@rise25media.com, and you can learn more at rise25.com. And I'm excited to introduce today's guest. Before I introduce today's guest, who is a master at Work the System, and I always learn something when I talk to him, I want to give a big shout out to Dan Cashell. Dan Cashell, I knew of Josh and his work, and we had a dinner in Arizona, and Dan Cashell invited Josh to come to the dinner, and we were be able to connect more intimately. And so thanks, Dan, for ultimately introducing me to Josh. And Owen at SweetProcess.com also reintroduced Josh and I as well. So shout out to Sweet Process and their podcast. So today we have Josh Fonger, who is the CEO of Work the System. His consulting firm, Work the System, WTS Enterprises, has attracted over 100,000 business owners from over 50 countries. Josh has personally consulted or coached over 500 business owners from more than 100 industries. And this can range from small startups to really large $500 million enterprises. And what I find is he has the unique ability of developing and implementing systematic solutions to really complex problems. And you can check out the book, Work the System, The Simple Mechanics of Making More and Working Less. It's written by Sam Carpenter. And Sam basically said that there's nobody in the world who's better equipped at helping business owners implement Work the System than Josh. So Josh, thanks for joining me.
I'm glad to be here.
There's so much we could talk about. We'll talk about the Work the System methodology. We'll talk about, the influence of Sam Carpenter. But in this day and age, with the craziness of the world, whenever you're listening to this, maybe there's some crisis going on. But as we're recording this, there's, the world isn't shut down as we know it, but we're kind of homebound. And hacks for homeschooling is really what I've retitled this after talking to you. But Josh they have always homeschooled their kids. And we were talking out, before we hit record, and he's like, people think people who homeschool their kids are weird, and because they are weird. So what did you mean by that?
Yeah, well, I don't deny that. Growing up, my goal was always to be, well, I think everyone is to kind of conform to be normal. But once we started homeschooling, we kind of decided on purpose that we were going to be different on purpose, but be purposeful with how we're different. And so, yeah, we started homeschooling. I got 3 kids. My oldest is 14, 3 boys. And just early on, my wife was like, she's really driven. And she's really driven to do what's right, not necessarily what is easy or what is normal. And
homeschooling is not easy. Believe it is like, it's a nightmare in our house, but go on. Yeah.
And so she was doing all this research, and this is like 13, 14 years ago. And she's like, we should homeschool. I'm like, what are you talking about? Homeschooling. And it took me a few years to warm up to the idea.
Why did she say that?
She had, well, not to go into a long story, but she was a semi-professional ski racer, downhill ski racer. And so she always traveled with tutors. And so she was always different parts of the world traveling, and she's broken most of the bones in her body, multiple concussions, broke her back. And so she stopped racing, but she was on the pre-Olympic team, very competitive. And so she just knew that you didn't have to do it like the normal way. There are a lot of ways to learn. And
she didn't do it the normal way. So she was forced, because of her skill set, she had to be on the road.
Yeah, a couple hours of tutoring a day was all that they needed to, and she's quite smart. And so, anyway, so that kind of opened the door to her mind to the possibility of it. But then 2 of our kids are special needs. And so when our first one was born, we knew that a normal approach was just not going to work at all. So we knew that from the beginning. And so that got us creative, kind of thinking about options. And, he has some major difficulties with a lot of things, but also he has major brilliance with certain things. Like the first time you read, and most people wouldn't believe me, but he was like, 1.5, 2 years old, somewhere in that range. Wow. And I was driving around in the shopping cart, grocery store, and he points out, he says, cold beer. I'm like, cold beer. And on the wall, there's a big sign that says cold beer. And I was like, oh, that's the first reading of my son is the word.
Did that even hit you that he was actually reading at that point? Because you taught him to read. I mean, you read with him, right? But
yes, a lot of reading with him. But that was the first, like, just spontaneous reading. And I don't drink, so that was just funny that that was the first time I was like, my son's reading. And so he really picked up on things really early for some things, and then really late for other things. Mm-hmm. And so, he's probably 5 years ahead in math right now, but maybe like multiple years behind on some other things that he probably wouldn't want me to mention. But I think kids grow differently. And so we took a very, I guess, custom approach, which is difficult, which is time consuming. And I would not say it's for everybody or even for most people. It wouldn't fit in their lifestyle, but because of being an entrepreneur and working from home, it's given us a lot of flexibility to do it. And I think, like we mentioned, now everyone's kind of forced into doing it. And there's a lot of unsavory parts of homeschooling, which is the interruptions, the fact that your kids are only 10 feet away at all times. So it does pose some work challenges.
Now that you say that, Josh, it makes perfect sense, because no matter who you are, I mean, whether you have special needs or you don't, you're going to be at different levels in different top subjects, right? Yeah. But we're kind of thrown into one size fits all.
Yeah, which, I mean, one size fits all is efficient for a society, of course, right? But if you have options and means and you want something different, then of course a one-to-one approach would be better. And what really changed my paradigm, I think his name is Art Robinson. Now, he has some very extreme political beliefs, which I think most people, well, who knows your audience, but not everyone's going to follow that. But I met this guy in Oregon, which was a profound paradigm shift for me, which was he had like 6 or 7 kids, and his wife died. And his oldest kid is like 9. And he says, you know what? I'm going to teach my kid. He's a brilliant scientist. I'm going to teach my kids to teach themselves. And so he would spend less than 1 hour a day teaching all 9 of his kids. And maybe he has 6 kids. I think it's 6 kids. Anyways, they all like became like PhDs. They all got full ride scholarships. They all taught themselves, like self-taught. So instead of him teaching, he said, here's what I need you to do. And they went to the library, got the books, taught themselves, self-taught, taught each other, and all got full ride scholarships. And they created their own homeschool curriculum based on materials that were pre-copyright, so like 1950 and earlier. And they created their own homeschool program that you can buy. And I think they made, I don't know, I'm not quoting this properly, but maybe millions of dollars off of like they built their own digital product, like in the early 2000s. The kids built a product and sold it.
Is it a good resource? Like where should we,
where
should people find it? Oh, okay.
I mean, they could look it up, but that was just a paradigm shift for me about 10 years ago. I was like, so you don't actually have to teach every single thing to your kids. Actually, you just need to give them the right standards, the morals, the right beliefs, right? As their leader, you have to lead them and coach them, but you don't actually have to teach them if you let them. So he basically said, if I can teach my kids to read and to write, they can do everything else themselves. And that was it. And it was pretty amazing. I was like, wow, you can really do that? And he's like, yeah, definitely. Because he still worked 8 hours a day.
How did you come across his work?
It's a long story, but I won't go into all of it. But basically, because of the fact that I was helping Sam on some of his political endeavors, maybe like 7-8 years ago, we met him through Oregon as we were traveling the state.
So it was random. It's not like you were like, I'm looking for homeschooling resources and it came up.
Totally random. Yeah,
Wow.
totally random. And I think the other thing that it shows the uniqueness, I think, of each person. And if they're willing to step outside the matrix for just a second, which is a scary place because you're different than everyone else, there's a lot of possibilities in terms of, it was crazy. So we're really going off on a tangent here, but we visited his house, right? Yeah. And his kids had a fascination with organs. So they would travel around and they would get
like human or animal organs.
No, like the musical organs.
Oh, okay. I was going to say this is like okay.
And so in their house, they had like 8 organs that they had actually purchased, like from churches that were just falling apart. And then they would rebuild all of the pipe organs, which are gigantic. And they would tune them by ear. And it was like, just because, why not?
Why not? That was like one of their projects.
And I was just like, that is very strange. And so we mentioned homeschoolers are odd. I would say that's definitely true. Anyways, the point is it opened up my mind the fact that it doesn't require that I have to actually teach 8 hours a day. But I do have to actually give my kids a structure, direction, and coach them. And then they can then grow into what they're meant to be. And that can definitely look more divergent than just this is the curriculum every single day.
I want to hit on the structure and the standards because I think that applies universally, to us, to our business. And talk about the structure for a second. How does your wife structure or you structure the day?
Sure. Yeah. Well, so I think the main thing is for anybody, this is for business, for life, is to kind of know where you're trying to hit. What is the goal? What does a win look like? And then to kind of work your way backwards.
Not pulling my hair out is the goal. No, I'm just
and then it's to build a series of things. So we use checklists and schedules for our kids. For a while there, I was using Todoist with my kids, but we just line out the specific things in the specific times, just like you would in any other school, I guess you'd say, and allow the kids to check them off. And when they get a certain number of checks done, they can reward themselves with certain things that they enjoy doing. But it's curated as opposed to just do whatever you want. It's very much like, here are the things that must get done. And then we lay them out in the list. And then once you get all these things done, then you can do these things that you probably find more pleasurable than doing math. So we print off a daily checklist and then hand it out to the kids and say, go for it. Right. And most of it is self-directed, self-teaching. Elements are online, elements are books, elements of all being outside. And then they have to, knock those things off. And so that has to do with, their spiritual development, has to do with their physical development, has to do with, the mathematical, historical. And so there's
different categories.
Yeah. Different categories of what we want to make sure that they are growing in. And so, different people are going to do different things. So if you want your kid to be an artist, you're going to spend a lot more time doing artwork. We know our kids are not going to be artists, right? So we're not spending a ton of time on painting and drawing, unless maybe they're making a card for their mom. But beyond that, that's not like a big focus for our family. But another family, they might have their kid do 3 hours of piano a day, right? So I think that it gives you the flexibility. And so each of our kids have different strengths, different weaknesses, and different interests. And like my oldest son really enjoys creative writing, like he's writing a book right now. So
nice.
That's one of the things he wants to spend more time on. And that's a good use of time. If he said that one of his dreams was being a video gamer, then I probably wouldn't give him a whole lot of time to push that skill set, right? So,
you're like, that's from 9 p.m. to like 1 a.m. you could do your gaming. So are there any categories that people should consider? Maybe there aren't. Like the typical ones are writing, reading, math. Are there any ones that you would urge people to think about that maybe we haven't thought about?
Oh, subjects?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Like you mentioned spirituality. I don't know if people would necessarily lump that into homeschooling, which is interesting. Like, great. Like there should be a section of exploring that, right?
Yeah. Well, so, I mean, as most people know, like every college and university primary purpose initially when they're built in the U.S. was for spiritual development, right? Development and morality. Like that's why all the churches, all the hospitals had that as their starting point. So for us, that's kind of an important starting point for the education, because like why are we here? What is this for? What is the purpose? And who are you working towards and what are you working towards? So that's an important kind of grounding starting point. So we typically start each day with that, mix it into, mealtime, and then at the end of each day. And they have some alone time to do that. So I think that's probably more of a focus on ours than most people. But I think that's part of the challenge of homeschooling. It's like starting a business, is because you have 100% control to make as many mistakes or positive things as possible. And you get to curate it. Like we have people who, friends who do homeschooling, and they are just obsessed with a certain subject, and that's just going to be their thing. That's fine, right? They get to choose, right? They have freedom to choose that. And a lot of people don't, I think are worried they're going to make a mistake, or they are concerned with the responsibility. And so it's just easier to not have to think about those things. But what I found is that as you're stacking up your kids' days with things that you think are going to be most valuable for them and for their life, usually they still have a ton of free time, right? Like if we have our kids do 3 hours of school a day, they'll still be years ahead of their peers, because it really doesn't take that long.
That's what we're discovering. Yeah.
To do most
it's like,
of the things.
Okay, I finished this 2.5 hours. Like, what are you doing in school all day?
Yes. Well, because exactly, just to be, it is obviously it's partly for education, but partly it's to keep your kids away so you can work 8 hours a day, so they kind of line up. But so that we want our kids to have tons of time just to explore what they're interested in, what they enjoy, what's fun for them, because they're not going to have maybe as much time to do that when they're working, and so they have some time to figure out what is their skills, what is their boundaries, what are they gifted in, and what do they have interest in. And it's kind of fostering that opportunity, I think, is an important thing. And not everyone has a chance to do that. I had a chance to do that in my work career. Similarly, my dad worked the same job his entire life. He was an eye doctor at like 22, and he retired at 65. He was an eye doctor the whole time. Worked in the same location, same business, every day. Which is better, one or two, over and over and over and over again. And
did you ever think about being an eye doctor?
I did, and he said, "Don't do it." But I, not to say there's anything wrong with that, but I think that that was
he
thing.
an optometrist or ophthalmologist?
Okay. An optometrist. But I was in real estate development, and once I got laid off, 2008, I had this opportunity to basically be unemployed for 9 months with a couple kids. And
That sounds scary to me.
it was, lost
Yeah.
house, car,
Jeez.
all savings, all retirement, massive debt, and lived in my in-laws condo. It was pretty bad. But what I did get is I got 9 months of reflection and 9 months of, opportunity to really understand what do I enjoy doing? What am I gifted in? What is the next chapter? And I think a lot of people don't get that. And maybe it's because it's not forced onto them. It was forced onto me. But they don't get that opportunity.
A lot of people right now, Josh, it's forced onto them. You know what I mean? So this is a really, really perfect time for a conversation about that.
Yeah. And I think, there is the need to survive. Obviously, you need to pay to have food and to have electricity and stuff like that. But what I know, found out through that experience is that everything that actually matters can't be taken from you. Friends, family.
When you get laid off.
Yeah, when you have nothing left. For Christmas, we went to Walgreens and we looked at toys and played with them, but we didn't buy any of them. We just went home because we had no money, right? But all
you
of
find
the things,
creative workarounds.
Yeah, but all the things that mattered, they can't be taken away from you when your job is taken away from you. And so that, your value as a human being, your purpose, all of those things that are innate don't go away when your job goes away. And so that time period was I think was essential in building who I am now, because it makes you fearless as an entrepreneur and knowing what's the worst that could happen? That wasn't so bad. So I think that was a really important step as I became an entrepreneur, as I became a business consultant. And also realizing that I think that, God has a unique plan for each person. So in my case, I wrote my business thesis when I got my MBA about why you should never hire a business consultant, right? Because I thought that for the most part, they didn't really help people that much. They usually just took their money, gave them boilerplate solutions. Here's a solution I gave to everybody else. Here you go, charge you an arm and a leg and get out the door. And the long-term effects and solutions didn't usually stick because homegrown or internally grown solutions, my thesis was they actually work better, right? And so the only job I could find after 9 months of being unemployed was to be a business consultant. And so after thousands of resumes out there, tons of interviews, that was the only one. And so I said, sure, I'll take it. And just fell in love with the profession and the impact, and realizing how important it is to be a catalyst for change, how important it is to help people see things from an outside perspective, how important it is to grow the skills and the tools and the abilities of a team from the outside that an internal team just can't do, or can't do as fast. And so that's really been what I've done over the last 10 years. And meeting Sam Carpenter, which we're getting to the the main structure of this talk, was
there is
instrumental.
No structure of this talk. This is just about your journey and the interesting portions, right?
So when I met Sam, what I was realizing was I was burning out from consulting. So I was flying from place to place to place. And I was helping people with their inside sales, outside sales. I would build people's merchandising plans. I would help them hiring. I'd help them with firing. I'd do layoffs. We did several bankruptcies, turnarounds, build out financial forecasts, budgets, everything. And it was, as you can imagine, get kind of burned out when you're in Tampa, and then you're in Bellingham, Washington.
Taxing, but also sounds emotionally taxing too with some of the stuff you're doing.
Yeah, it was horrible. I grew a lot, but
what was the toughest situation you had to be in, as far as maybe layoffs or helping people with?
The toughest situation, well, there's lots of them. There's several people that, it's horrible to watch someone's business get shut down after they've been in business for decades. The turning point for me, and the big reason why I connected with Sam's message, work the system, and his whole philosophy, was a client that I helped turn around in California, and I won't name details about it, but we went in there and had to lay off a bunch of people. We had to restructure it, had to change the strategy, the pricing, liquidate a bunch of materials. It was extremely complex. Work with them for 6 months, and then I was like, okay, now they're going to be successful, right? And cultural redesign, new strategy, and they start to go up. And I'm like, oh, we saved that company. And then a couple of years later, I'm on LinkedIn, and the person's picture pops up on my feed. And instead of being the owner of a $5 million multi-location business, he is the salesperson, like a junior salesperson at another competitor's company. So he went from owning and having hundreds of employees to just being a salesperson, right? Like probably what he was doing when he was 25, he was 63, and he was doing that. And I was like, wow, that implementation didn't work
What
so
happened?
well. Well, it's because we didn't actually document the systems that we built. We said, here's a system for selling. Here you go. Here is this. We'd hand spoon feed, hand deliver this thing. And then it ended up that none of it stuck, because we didn't actually help them grow it themselves, So we didn't, in our philosophy, we changed the owner and the team's mindset. Then we build them a strategy. Then we build them principles and then procedures. And the whole idea is that this infrastructure is going to stay stable. This infrastructure is going to guide you and your team. And whether people come and go or whether you come and go, the business is based on this rock, this foundation that is scalable and is not, doesn't get tossed back and forth. It doesn't fall apart when it has a bad day. One person leaves, it doesn't totally change your business strategy. Actually, that strategy is scalable and built to last, and it's going to be worth something someday. So we put the business over here and the owner is over here, as opposed to the owner being the business. And in his case, he was the business. And when he was having a bad day or a bad month, the business was having a bad day, bad month. And so Sam's methodology, the work system method, really is the method that I find is not the sexiest, but it's the most useful for actually extracting an owner from having to be there all the time to building this entity of value production that's scalable, that is not required on any one person, but is required for people. Is people are required to work it, good people to work it, but it can scale and grow.
Can you talk a little bit about some of the methodology, for work the system for people who aren't familiar with it? Sure.
Yeah. And they can get, more information at workthesystem.com or get the book for free there for download or audio. But the main components are that owners typically see themselves as being the business, and they're reactionary. So they react to all incoming things coming in, and they work way too many hours. They're totally stressed out, and they don't have good perspective. So the first thing is we help them change their mindset, which we call the systems mindset, which is being outside and slightly elevated above your business, looking down at it, and you see there's this one system called answering the phone. There's another system called processing a check. There's another system called delivering the package. Like each of these separate systems, you see them, right? And you're aware that all of these things, if perfected individually and combined, could make a perfect business that's scalable. So you first need to understand that the business is not based on you always being there. It's based on these systems running well. And so your job is to make the systems run well, not for you to run yourself into an early grave, which is what most owners do in most of the crowd business. So we make it not about them or any one person, but about systems. That's the first piece. The second thing is a strategy. We call it the strategic objective. Most people are aware that a company needs to have direction, needs to know how they're going to get there. And so we help companies define that, which usually is a pivot. And people who are watching this during the coronavirus time, maybe there's a small pivot you need to make in your business. Instead of just being entirely physical, maybe there's a percentage that's virtual or a percentage of your business that now is done online. But we help companies develop that strategic objective to give them clear focus, speed, and they know what they're building then. Otherwise, owners tend to build what the customers want, and then they go all over the place instead of just building a structure and a strategy that's going to endure and scale and grow. So we build that strategic objective. The next piece is the operating principles. Those principles would be the guiding beliefs, the decision-making guidelines for all all activities. So whether it's hiring, firing, time management, productivity, technology, how do you decide what is the right choice? And you want to empower everybody in the company, including yourself, with these decision-making guidelines so that, if there's a spill on the floor, should you clean it up, or should you wait till the maintenance person cleans it up? Or should you put a sign out there that says, somebody clean this up soon? Like, what is the right decision? In your culture, is it, hey, we all get our hands dirty and we take care of things as they happen? Or are you in a culture where, hey, everybody has delegated their roles, don't go into someone else's roles?
So
I don't know.
It kind of goes back to core values.
Core values. Yep, exactly. So that'd be another way to say core values.
What would be an example of one of those, that how maybe you made a decision, or one of the companies you helped made a decision based on operating principle?
Yeah. So one that we're doing right now is that stagnant water is deadly. That's what I like to say, is that if you are not going to move forward, you're going to fester. Things are going to start to rot. It's like a pond. And so this idea of stagnant water is deadly, it means movement is better than no movement. And movement's going to define or educate you or inform you on your next movement. So during this coronavirus time, it's not like, well, I guess we should just pause. It's like, no, we're going to keep moving. We're a river. We're going to continue to make content. We're going to continue to podcast. We're going to continue to build out systems. And so we're not stopping, because we know that, the principle, stagnant water is deadly. We also have another principle, which is best idea wins. And so with that principle, whether it's our newest hire, or someone who's been with us for a long time, or it's an idea from the outside, or it's a complaining customer, no matter where the idea comes from, best idea wins. It's not about whether it's my idea as the owner. And so this gives everybody the ability to speak up, and the desire to speak up, and to not hold to my idea wins. It's best idea wins, right? And so in any one of these different principles is going to guide the way we make decisions during gray areas that are outside of normal business, right? I mean, the normal processes of your business, those are already defined, but things that are slightly outside, or unique situations or exceptions to the rules, you want to know how to think about and interpret and make decisions based on that. I've got a client, a dental office, where they had a principle about teamwork, and one of their most dynamic employees, who was the most bubbly and people loved, they realized that she was actually not a team player. She would come and go. She wouldn't keep her work organized. She was disruptive. And they said, you know what, this person just, everyone else is playing to help each other, but this person's really just in it for themselves. And we have to let her go. She's disrupting the team, too disruptive. And so we let her go because of that. So that was one of the unique firings, because it happened at a cheesecake factory. I remember that one. But so every principle, you want to make sure you apply it. There's not just to put on the wall. They're not vanity principles. They're principles that are going to decide, or they're going to inform how you make decisions. I had one client where they had a principle about procrastination. And within that principle, it said, lateness is a form of abuse, which is pretty strong language. And immediately after they put the principle in place, they were all of a sudden on time for everything, because this principle helped them change how they operated their business. And it really transformed the repeat customers, their referrals, and the experience that new customers had, because they stopped being late all the time. So I think it can be very powerful. And the last piece is working procedures, which is probably what we're most known for, which is this concept of everything that you do in a repeatable fashion, you want to have a working procedure, written procedure that tells you how to do it properly, so that you can improve the quality by looking at it. You can measure it, you can delegate it, you can cross-train it. And as you build these various procedures, working procedures, you're going to build out stability, infrastructure, and value in your business, because then it can grow beyond just the skills of any one person. So that's the last piece of the puzzle.
Thank you. That was amazing. I really appreciate that. And how do you, if you go into a company, do you find that there's companies that maybe they don't have core values, or they have them and it's just, in their desk drawer, they don't abide by them? If they do, and maybe that means they're not really core values, if it's just written on a piece of paper, how does a company, form them and implement them? Is there a certain starting place for that?
Yes, the starting place would be to the owner to believe that there's actually some value in doing it. So a lot of them don't really believe there's value in doing it, and so they don't. Or they're owners who think it's going to make their company, their employees happier, or make them look better to their customers. So they'll just write up a quick list of core values. They put them on the wall. Core values. We're going to be nice each day, and we're going to have a smile, or whatever. So they just do it just to do it, to check it off the list. So you really have to decide: is this going to empower, enable my team to do the best work, and is it going to allow me as the owner to not have to babysit? Like, I don't have to babysit anyone on my team, because I say, here's our strategy, here's our principles. If you follow this strategy, these principles, whether you're programming some new automation, or you're designing something, or you're writing something, you're going to be really close to how I would do it, because this is my mind and my team's mind best attempt at determining where we're going to go and how we're going to get there. And so they're extremely valuable for efficiency. So I think that principles get done if the owner actually believes they're valuable. They don't get done if they don't. But then from a practical standpoint, once they are done, you have to talk about them. You have to bring them up during a weekly meeting. You have to actually bring them as part of your onboarding for your new team. You have to continue to go back to them. So when someone makes a mistake, let's just see. So one of our principles is business for grown-ups, right? So if we're trying to sell to somebody and we're like, gosh, this person just is on the fence, they're not seem to. It's because we sell to people who are mature business owners. We sell to people who actually are mature enough to invest in their infrastructure to scale. So if we're having a hard time with somebody and they're not improving, it's because they actually didn't fit one of our core values, right? They're not the right maturity, right? And so we kind of have to bring up those principles on a regular basis to remind ourselves of who we are and what lane we want to stay in. And so I think that's it. The other thing that owners have a trouble with, if I was going to hit on some more, would be they're not good at writing, which is fine. And so they think that they have to produce all the principles. And I think that their ideas and input matter in their leadership, but they can have someone on their team or a writer come in and write some of these principles for them, right? So just because something's important doesn't mean you have to do it yourself. And we really want to encourage our owners. That's why we have consultants and procedure writers to help companies. They say, gosh, Josh, this sounds awesome. I know that most owners don't want to do
help
this.
Us. Yeah.
Yeah. But they know it's important. And so that's where we come into, whether it's through training or having a consultant do it or a procedure writer, we come in to help fill in the gaps where they're just not going to do that one piece. But they still want to lead it and they know it's important. And I think that's really where we try to fit in, is to help owners make that shift.
Yeah, that's huge. And we are always trying to improve this part of our company. And, we have a all hands meeting once a month, and we will talk about some of the core values and we would make decisions on it. And we have people kind of tell if they've noticed someone demonstrating one of those core values and kind of give some examples, a way to reinforce it in our minds. And one of them is, always work with nice people. And, but that means clients and staff. And if a client is not being nice to one of the staff, I don't care who it is, it's not someone, we want to work with, and so we've had to let clients go because they were just, I wouldn't use the word abusive, but sometimes people are really strong with their language via email that they wouldn't say in person. And it just is not fun. And so, yeah, it's definitely something that we are always trying to improve on. And it helps them make decisions on, like you said, the teamwork thing's a great example, right? Or someone from the team not nice can mean a lot of different things. But so thank you, for reinforcing that and pointing that out. So Josh, people can check out workthesystem.com. I have two last questions for you.
Sure.
But I want people, point people towards that resource, and also give a shout out for your podcast. They can check that out. Where else should we point people towards? Work the System. Where can they find the podcast, and any other places we should point people towards?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, whatever social media platform they're on, they could look up Work the System or me, Josh Fonger. But then our main the main place we send people is our website, because then we can get the most resources. Our podcast is there, blog posts. They can see any of the, I used to have a very big problem with selling years ago, but I'm realizing that the only way I can really help somebody is to is to sell them something, to get them to move. And so, all of our products that are available for sale are there, and that's what we're That's what we're here for.
What are some of the things that you have? So what are some of the, I guess, ways to engage with Work the System? Some of the offerings.
Yeah. Well, so, and I don't know when this is going to air, but we are launching a new product I'm very excited about. It's called Systemize to Thrive. So this is going to air in about 4 weeks. It'll be live. And that is designed for owners and, their owner, second in command, small teams who want to finally, go through this whole method we talked about. They want to go from working in the business to working on the business. They want to go from, being an employee in their own business to actually owning a business. So that helps them through that transition. So that's our lowest way to get in, at least expensive, but I think critical for any small business. And we got countless testimonials on that one. The one above that would be certification. So if you're thinking, gosh, I want to get certified in what you do, certified business systems managers, we're offering that in a few weeks. And that's going to be kind of our flagship for those who want to get certified. And then I have a team of consultants. So consultants who do this around the world in different verticals, and they're certified business systems professionals. And so they are, they're literally doing what I've done the last 10 years. So either coaching, consulting, flying in, supporting.
Like full hands-on approach.
Hands-on, actually doing it for you. It's done for you. And, whatever it takes. I mean, I had this one client who was on the fence about working with me 6-7 years ago. And, he came back 7 years later, and he was in the exact same spot as he was 7 years later.
Oh.
And he said, well, you're too expensive. And I did the math. Anyway, so I won't go through that. But the whole point is, like, nothing happened for 7 years, except for what happened in 7 years. His health went tragically downhill. Major cancer in his company, and his wife, who was his business partner, they divorced. And I had to help them separate the company, remove half the family.
It was a much harder.
It was horrible. Way more expensive.
Challenge 7 years down the road.
Yeah. So anyways, I think that if your ambitions are to get bigger, whether you work with me or anyone else, you're going to have to put the structure in place. So if your ambitions are to stay really small and to stay, everything you can touch and feel, then our approach is not for you. I mean, just know that you have a job and you better show up and not get sick.
Pressure.
Yeah, no pressure.
Last question, or two questions really quickly. I know you have to go in a couple minutes, but I always ask, what's been a low moment and how you push through, and what's been a proud moment? And I don't know if that necessarily low moment you would consider when that whole layoff period or not, and how you push through, what your mindset was then compared to now is obviously more optimistic. When you're going through it, it's a lot tougher, I'm sure. What would you consider a low moment and how you push through?
Yeah. Probably the low moment was when I first started consulting. I was just paid based on what I sold and what I did. I got paid a commission on. And so I was given a list of about 3,000 companies, and he said, just call these companies, and anybody you sell, you get half of it. So I had to build financial forecasts for companies. And it was in December, and I was staying in my in-laws' condo, and there was nowhere for me to work except for outside. So I'm sitting outside with a jacket and a hat and gloves on, making cold calls on a patio. And I had to call 3,000 people in December to convince them to buy a $3,000 financial forecast or something like that. It was horrible. And once I realized that with enough hard work and determination, I could make it in the consulting world. I think that was probably the low point, but I think that was a good experience in terms of realizing that if you need to eat, you'll figure it out, right? And so that was probably the starting of my consulting career, and it really helped me to learn a lot and realize that books, like you can see, books are my friend. So that month, it was like, okay, I read 3 books on cold calling. I wrote my first cold calling script, and then I got to work. And I think that now whenever I want to learn something new, there's always great resources. Yeah. So that was a big deal. And then in terms of high point, I forgot what the question was.
Well, stick on that for a second. So what are your favorite books of all time, or what are some of the ones behind you that you, in any category? I mean,
I would say find the best books that have been around the longest in the category that you're interested in, right? There's so many good books, and I wouldn't even be able to direct you into one. This one, this one's a good one. Work the system. If you're watching the video, but otherwise, no, there's a ton. So I don't even want to recommend one, except it's a children's book. If you got a children's book, my favorite one to read is a book called Pilgrim's Progress. That's the one that I love reading with my kids. Which because we talked about that in the beginning of the program, and that is people who like famous books. There is the most famous book in the world, which of course is the Bible, most read book, most published. The second most famous book of all time is Pilgrim's Progress, which almost no one knows. That one, of course, is written, I think, in like the 1700s. That one is a good one if you like Old English. But again, business books, I mean, you name it. I mean, a lot of my business books are just on my phone, so I don't even have them back there because I just listen to them.
Yeah.
But I think I try to consume a book a week. And I think that's books are usually more dense, thorough, and helpful, in my opinion, than just pithy blog posts that are written by.
People poured their whole life work into a book, for sure.
Yeah, I prefer books as opposed to blog posts, as opposed to trolling the internet, because I think that those are more dense. I just read again just last week with Eric Ries's Lean Startup. It's a great book, but that's kind of important to what I'm doing right now in my business. And so it was a relevant book.
Yeah. Josh, thank you. Everyone check out workthesystem.com. Really appreciate you.
All right. Likewise. Thanks, Jeremy.
What I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the